Metroid Prime Remastered is in the conversation for one of the most impressive, best-looking games on Nintendo Switch. And with this in mind, many question why Nintendo has deemed it a remaster and not a remake. When you look at the remaster side by side with its previous versions, the difference is significant. They actually created new art for this game for every area and made it new and better than ever before. And if you didn't know better, you would say this is a modern game that doesn't even seem like it could be running on Switch, yet it is, and at 60 frames per second. So then why does Nintendo deem this a remaster and not a remake? Well, that's what we're talking about today.
Hey, listen!
Welcome everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about why Metroid Prime Remastered is not a remake, even though it's extremely impressive and I think it's one of the best games to play on Switch today. And I say that because I definitely 100% want to stress that when I say this game is not a remake, that is not me in any way trying to slight the game or suggest anything negative about it. I'm actually arguing here that it being a remaster is better than being a remake in this particular case. So firstly, let's talk about what is a remaster and what is a remake. And in truth, this I would say is a blurred line situation. It is not totally clear because when you take a look at how the industry has handled these different labelings, I would say it's been a little inconsistent. You look at Final Fantasy VII Remake, and that's an amazing project, but I would not call that a remake. I would call that a reimagining. Why? Because sure, visually it is substantially better, but there is a whole bunch of new gameplay, new areas to explore, new characters to interact with. The way you move about and progress in the world, the way you do combat, everything is new. It's totally new gameplay. It's a different direction. It's not even really the same genre anymore. And also the story. The story is not exactly the same. There are some significant changes. So really, Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's a new Final Fantasy game loosely based off of the original release. It's a reimagining, yet it is called a remake. Now when we take a look at, say for example, some of the Resident Evil remakes, those also have some new gameplay. The structure of the games are changed somewhat, and visually they are totally different. But at least from a story perspective and a direction, they are mostly the same and still fall under the same genre. Of course, there are still elements there that are reimagined somewhat. So when you're talking about a remake, you are rebuilding a game, and sometimes you're going to go back and change some things. But then looking at some Nintendo projects, you look at something like Link's Awakening Remake. Actually, that game, they don't even label it as a remake, they just call it The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. But we refer to it as a remake because, well, it is. It's running on an entirely new graphics engine. Visually, it's totally different. It's a new art style. It's reimagined visually. From a gameplay perspective, it is sort of matching the original release. Same dungeons and all that, same structure of progression, but of course there are some quality of life changes. It feels a little bit different being on the Switch as opposed to the Game Boy, and there is some new content thrown in there as well. So I'll say that when a game is remade in this day and age, it does kind of entail that some of the game is going to be a little different. Although I'm sure there are some games that have been deemed as a remake that just look different visually and everything else is totally the same. So it can get confusing. For example, we talked about it when it released, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. That game came out initially on the Wii, and visually this game just looks so much better. They worked on the visuals so much that it looks like a modern Xenoblade game. However, there are some artifacts, there are some elements of the game that can still be observed to look somewhat like the original release. So not everything's been totally reworked, just most of it. And from a gameplay perspective and from a story perspective, it's unchanged. There are some quality of life improvements, some minor things to smooth out the gameplay, make it easier to navigate the menus and explore the world, but it is basically the exact same experience. However, they did also add an entirely new epilogue story to the game that is a whole other area we could not explore beforehand, with new characters and enemies and new gameplay. So it does blur the lines there a little bit too. You could say that the main campaign's a remaster, but when they literally throw in new content, that makes it a little bit harder to qualify, and Nintendo just refers to it as a definitive edition. But then you take a look at something like 3D World plus Bowser's Fury or Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. These are remasters, I would say, of games that came out only a few years back. And I think Nintendo refers to them as a deluxe because they are more recent games, but they are enhanced in some way. They improved the resolution in these games, they added new content to these games, and some quality of life updates to make the overall experience a little bit better, a little bit more fun. But there's definitely different labels for different things. We got definitive editions, we got remasters, remakes, deluxes, reimaginings. It's hard to keep up with it all, and I do think it's not totally consistent. But looking specifically at Metroid Prime Remastered, I think it's fair to call it a remaster. And I am totally acknowledging that visually, the game is 100% remade. They have new art for this game. They reimagined all the areas and made it look like something that we would have remembered from the original game, but it's all totally different. There are new cracks and bricks and trees and foliage. Visually, it is remade or reimagined, but done in a way that respects the original to a T. However, the underlying gameplay structure is the same. The code is the same. According to Jack Matthews on Twitter, on February 9th, they said, "The Metroid Prime core gameplay code in Prime Remastered, cameras, AI, bosses, is essentially unchanged. It's a remastered, not a remake. It's so impressive and respectful how much of the original game is still running under the hood." And here, Oatmeal Dome on Twitter says, "It seems that Retro Studios ported the original Metroid Prime codebase to the latest version of their proprietary game engine, Rude. The remaster is not emulated and it is not running on Unreal Engine." What I think these people are trying to say here is that yes, Metroid Prime Remastered is a remaster and not a remake, but this in no way is a bad thing. Retro Studios took the original code of this game and ported it over to the most modern version of their engine that they've been working on for years, continually improving upon it. And thanks to this modern engine, they are able to recreate all the visuals and it looks as amazing as it does. But that core gameplay structure, that core essence of what Metroid Prime is, how it plays, how it moves, how it functions, that's all retained. That's why when you play it, it feels like Metroid Prime. Even though there are a number of quality of life updates, there are even some updates that are retained from the Prime trilogy as well. That was also somewhat of a remaster for Metroid Prime. And they've added a lot of new control options, the menus look better, the visuals look better, the UI looks better. And there are new things to see in the bonus and extras mode as well. So there's a lot here that makes this an incredible experience. And ultimately, the reason this is better than a remake is because they are using that masterpiece code of a game that is Metroid Prime. That gameplay still feels the same. That is still there. They simply improved upon it. They've built upon it. And they made it look better than ever before with some nice quality of life updates. And that's in large part why this game is still reviewing higher than any other game out there today. And it looks better than arguably any other game out there today on Nintendo Switch. It's an impressive achievement, and it's just special to play and enjoy. And I've personally had an amazing time with the game so far. It's just incredible. And I'm glad they handled it in this way. This was the best way to go about redoing or re-releasing Metroid Prime. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.